Carl Jung wrote about a psychological pattern so unsettling that he called it one of the most difficult transformations in human nature. In his notes, he kept returning to patients, especially empaths, who looked gentle and broken until something inside them switched on. I call them the awakened. These people, embodying Jung's idea of integrating the shadow, didn't just change their own lives, they upended how we understand psychology. For decades, Jung tracked how the principles of shadow work reveal themselves in empathic people. Here is what he found: truths that still make psychologists uneasy. The kindest people are not weak. Their kindness conceals a weapon waiting to be forged. In notes from the Zurich clinic, Jung described a disturbing pattern. Patient after patient arrived with the same wounds. Empaths, systematically undone by those they believed loved them. They came with bruises they chalked up to accidents, with depressions they blamed on themselves, and with a universal habit of apologizing for existing. Jung documented dozens of such cases. All their lives they had absorbed other people's pain. The rage of alcoholic parents, a spouse's infidelity, a family's dysfunction. They were, as I call them, the emotional shock absorbers of their social systems, people who took on the collective psychological pain. What chilled Jung was this: empaths didn't merely endure abuse, they organized it in their minds. When Jung asked them to describe their relationships, he expected the ramblings of damaged minds. What he discovered changed everything. These patients were not broken by mistreatment, they were studying it. Empaths kept a mental ledger of everyone who had harmed them, cataloging triggers, weaknesses, and the deepest fears of their abusers. With surgical precision, they mapped emotional patterns, yet never used that knowledge, until something pushed them past the limit. Jung wrote that an empath's mind is not a victim's diary, but, as I would put it, a strategist's war room, waiting for activation. He realized he wasn't treating victims, he was sitting across from covert psychological geniuses. Their genius wasn't in building systems, but in emotional archaeology. By watching micro-expressions alone, they could excavate people's oldest wounds. Jung tested them by bringing in colleagues without offering any background. Within minutes, empaths identified childhood injuries, relational patterns, and professional fears with better than 95% accuracy. What shook Jung was that these empaths were not psychic. They were simply observing at a level most people can't. What others call intuition, they called data collection. Jung's breakthrough was stark. Empaths don't only feel more, they process emotional information faster and more precisely. Their brains are tuned to pattern recognition in behavior. Society convinced them that this gift is a curse. Each time they named lies, manipulation, or hidden motives, they were told they were too sensitive or too emotional. They learned to stay quiet, to doubt their seeing, to apologize for noticing what others could not. But truth does not vanish when we stop speaking it. It accrues over years. Jung noticed that empaths do not go mad from too much feeling. They unravel when their feelings are declared invalid. These weren't breakdowns. They were breakthroughs. The transformation didn't creep in. It detonated. Usually after a betrayal by the very person the empath trusted and defended most. Jung described infidelities, financial deceit, and emotional coercion by those closest to them. The wound wasn't only in the act, it was in realizing the empath had seen the signs and ignored them. They had swallowed pain, blamed themselves, tried to be better. Then came what I call the clarity event. Pattern recognition finally overpowered their faith in the best in people. The world expected empaths to sob, rage, fall apart. Their abusers braced for chaos. Instead, something unnerving happened. Empaths became unnaturally calm. Jung described this as the moment their analytic capacities lock into place with their emotional intelligence. They did not attack. They did not seethe. They spoke truth with clinical precision, like a surgeon revealing the diseased organ before excision. It wasn't revenge, it was clarity. Empaths deployed their full perceptual gift, not to excuse, but to expose behavior. Jung called it shadow integration. The instant a person stops denying the parts of self they suppressed, intellect, intuition, power, The empath's shadow is not evil. It is the silenced mind, the right to boundaries. Once integrated, they became psychologically complete. The change stuck. They didn't lapse back into people-pleasing, didn't apologize for boundaries, didn't second-guess their perception. They became what Jung feared most: empaths who cannot be manipulated. The ripple touched every domain of life. Within months, they left toxic relationships with surgical accuracy, cut off harmful relatives without theatrics, and rebuilt life on their own terms. Jung called them selectively empathic, still caring, but strategically guarding where their care goes. Their very presence made manipulators nervous. The tricks no longer worked, like vampires flinching from sun. Jung wrote that an awakened empath does not announce power. Others feel it in their bones. Sensitive himself, Jung recognized the path from the inside and wondered what would happen if empaths stopped being society's emotional shock absorbers and began using their gifts strategically. Watching them, he found they became extraordinarily effective. Their businesses thrived because they read clients' true needs. Their new relationships were healthy because they spotted manipulators in minutes. Their choices grew impeccable because they fully trusted their intuitive intellect. Empaths did not become less empathic. They became precisely empathic, and therefore precisely strategic. They could manipulate as easily as they were once manipulated, but they chose not to destroy. They simply removed toxic people. Jung was stunned. These were the figures manipulators fear most, those who see straight through them and do not need them. Their transformation reshaped systems. Families fractured because empaths stopped propping up dysfunction. Addicts met their addiction. Manipulative relatives lost their targets. Healthy people around them grew stronger, while the toxic exposed themselves trying to drag empaths back into old cycles. Their presence worked like a mirror, reflecting problems with uncomfortable clarity. Jung found that transformed empaths diagnosed others' wounds better than he could. That raised an ethical dilemma. If empaths can develop such insight, what does that mean for psychology? He designed an observation protocol for integration, documenting how empaths naturally develop a warrior consciousness after betrayal. Stage 1. Acknowledging suppressed aspects. Intellect, strength, the right to boundaries. Stage 2. Integrating light and shadow into a coherent self. Stage 3. Application. Empaths become psychological architects who can read and influence systems with uncanny accuracy. They are resistant to manipulation while retaining the capacity for love. I observed a fusion of compassion and wisdom, Jung wrote. These are the most psychologically powerful people I have met. The final stage is return to service. Empaths grew selectively generous, helping other empaths transform and building networks of psychologically resilient people. Jung concluded that empaths are not sick, but evolutionarily advanced, living in systems that exploit their gifts. In the wrong conditions, their abilities could turn destructive. So, he sketched a model of ethical integration, how empaths can use power to heal. He hid parts of this work, aware of how easily it could be weaponized. In his last notes, he called these people balanced warriors, capable of softness where it's earned an unyielding force against threat. They formed a template for the next step in human evolution: to feel everything without shattering, to see everything without growing cynical, to love deeply without losing oneself. Jung wrote that the empath's path is not from sensitivity to numbness, but from unconscious absorption to conscious choice. His observations held: empaths who integrate the shadow become psychologically non-permeable. You cannot trick them, gaslight them, or break them because they trust what they perceive. Every empath meets a moment of transformation, a betrayal that forces a choice between victimhood and sovereignty. Jung showed that most choose integration, becoming not cruel but precise, not losing heart but gaining spine. It is love with boundaries, care with protection. Jung wrote that the empath's greatest tragedy is not sensitivity, it is how long they wait to respect it. Empaths are not victims by nature. They are powerful. Society trains them to suppress that power to remain acceptable. When they break, it is not collapse. It is awakening to capacities that were always there. The kindest are often the strongest, because kindness without strength sustains dysfunction. Awakened empaths are evolution in motion, people who feel and choose with full awareness. The empath's road is not toward less feeling, but toward conscious feeling. Consciousness turns the victim into a force of nature. And the most beautiful finding in Jung's notes is this: they did not lose the ability to love. They learned to love themselves as fiercely as they had always loved others. If you are an empath, remember, your sensitivity is not a weakness, it is a weapon. The day you wield it consciously is the day you become truly formidable. Dangerous not to the innocent, but to those who exploit your gifts. The world needs empaths who know their worth, trust their perception, and refuse to dim their light for someone else's comfort. Jung left a final question. Will empaths choose to transform, or will life force them to? This video is for those who choose conscious transformation to become the awakened empath Jung wrote about. The world does not need broken empaths. It needs awakened ones. Transformation is inevitable. The only question is whether you will direct that power or it will direct you. Thanks for watching. See you in the next reality.